We build our lives on illusions of control. We draw lines around our property, we bolt our doors, and we name our fears. We believe that if we ignore the past long enough, it will simply become dust. For Eliza, the old farmhouse in Salem was not just a home. It was a sanctuary forged in the aftermath of a devastating war. A war waged against her own certainty, against the betrayal of a man she had once trusted, Michael. 7 years of solitude had passed since the divorce. 7 years of meticulous routine, designed to erase the noise of public scandal. Here, she believed, she was finally untouchable. But solitude, she would discover, is a cruel curator of secrets. It only polishes them until they gleam with urgency. On a bitter Thursday evening in late October, the atmosphere was a warning. The kind of storm that felt less like weather and more like a primal force demanding attention. The wind howled with the sound of a woman crying out for justice. 11:47 p.m. The knock came, a frantic, demanding intrusion that was the antithesis of everything Eliza had built. A stranger, soaked and desperate, standing on the threshold of her carefully sealed life. Welcome to Heartfelt Confessions. Tonight, we examine the 2 nights that exposed a decades-old crime. This is the story of Eliza, who thought she was safe, and the stranger who carried the key to her ex-husband's deadliest secret, a secret that, once told, would ruin everything. Eliza had chosen the farmhouse for its isolation. It stood a quarter-mile back from the main road, surrounded by dense, unyielding woods. Every detail of her day was orchestrated to maintain her emotional balance. She even meticulously charted her own heartbeat, monitoring it like a physician, just to ensure her internal chaos was under control. She was watching the fireplace. The hearth was the only place in the house she hadn't fully renovated. Michael had insisted on keeping the original stone. That thought alone, Michael insisted, was usually enough to spark anxiety. The power flickered again, a prolonged, unsettling darkness. When the light returned, Eliza was out of her seat, the brass fireplace poker heavy in her hand. And then the knock. It was a sound of absolute vulnerability and desperation. She crept toward the front door, the brass poker feeling cold and inadequate. Through the dusty, rain-streaked spy-hole, the man was barely discernible. His shape was tall, his posture defeated. He is alone. He is afraid. But I cannot break the rule. I cannot. She spoke through the heavy oak, her voice surprisingly steady, despite the tremor running through her hands. She asked him again to leave, threatening to call the county police. The man, who introduced himself as Thomas, pleaded for human mercy. He described his car, totaled in the flooded embankment on the back road. He claimed his phone had died instantly from the water. Please, ma'am, I am not a threat. I am just a man who made a wrong turn and desperately needs 5 minutes of your landline. I will leave the moment I call for a tow. Eliza's conscience waged a brief, violent war with her trauma. She remembered standing in the rain herself once, desperate and alone. That memory, sharp and cold, decided the outcome. She unlocked the deadbolt, but kept the heavy brass chain fastened. The door opened just enough for Thomas to slip into the small mudroom. Water dripped onto the polished wood floor. "The phone is in the kitchen," she commanded, her voice edged with rigid control. "You have 5 minutes. You do not touch anything else in my home." Thomas moved with a fluid grace that contradicted his desperate appearance. He made the call quickly, his voice low and intense. But as he spoke, his gaze was not on the water-stained floor, nor on the flickering light. His gaze was searching the furniture, the original architectural details. He moved like someone inspecting a memory. He hung up, the tension in the room thickening. The tow was delayed indefinitely. The storm had made the back roads impassable. He turned to Eliza, genuine despair settling over his face. He looked exhausted and deeply, deeply troubled. "They won't come until morning. Perhaps later. I apologize for intruding. I will just wait here until I can walk out." Eliza's throat tightened. She had just started to feel the danger recede, when Thomas walked slowly toward the living room mantel. He gently placed his damp, dark leather journal on the polished wood. His eyes, when they met hers, held a terrifying knowledge. "I know this house, Eliza. And I know your husband, Michael. Eliza physically recoiled. Every alarm bell she had suppressed for 7 years screamed to life. That is absolutely impossible. You are mistaken, and he is my ex-husband. Thomas didn't acknowledge her denial. He looked at the wedding photo on the mantel. I recognize this house, Eliza. I know the way the light hits this room in the mornings. I was raised here, but I was here long before the Harrington family adopted me. This house is where my mother, Rose, tried to hide her truth. And it's where she vanished, October 25th, 1995. The room seemed to shrink. Eliza's world, so carefully defined, was collapsing inward. Michael's evasions, his controlling secrecy. It all suddenly clicked into place with horrifying clarity. Thomas opened the water-stained journal. My mother was Rose. She wrote this journal until the day she disappeared. The police called it abandonment. They said she ran away from me. But she wrote this final entry. He read the final words aloud, his voice catching with suppressed agony. The pressure is too much. The man I love is a coward. He wants me to disappear and forget Thomas ever existed. But I won't. I swear on his life, I'll come back for him. I left a message in the one place only he would look. Eliza understood the horror. Thomas was the son of the house's silent tragedy. And the man who Rose loved, the man who banished Rose, was Michael. Sleep was impossible. The rain continued its steady, unforgiving rhythm. Eliza spent the remaining hours of the night in the living room chair, the fire long dead, staring at the face of Thomas. She realized her 7 years of solitude were not freedom. They were a form of imprisonment. Michael had placed her here as a silent sentinel, ensuring the property remained quiet, maintained, and closed off from curiosity. Why was he so insistent that I take the house? Michael's offer had been suspiciously generous during the divorce settlement. He claimed it was a burden he didn't want. He didn't want it to be sold. He didn't want strangers digging up the past. He wanted the house to be a tomb and me to be its keeper. The knowledge was sickening. The man she had spent 10 years building a life with was capable of a decades-long, meticulous deception. The emotional betrayal she had already endured was nothing compared to this. She shared her growing certainty with Thomas. It's not just a message for you, Thomas. It's a confession for him. It has to be hidden in something Michael built or rebuilt. Eliza's memory focused on Michael's odd obsession with the fireplace. He'd claimed the original structure was unstable and insisted on doing all the masonry work himself, dismissing the cost with unusual fervor. She led Thomas back to the massive stone chimney. She ran her fingers over the smooth, cold surface, then along the newly installed wooden trim that framed the mantel. He talked about an old brick pocket, a storage area in the original structure, she explained, her voice steady with resolve. He said he sealed it off. He lied. They worked in silence, Thomas using a knife to probe the seams Michael had carefully created. The rain outside seemed to hold its breath. Then, Thomas found it, a faint, almost invisible seam in the decorative wood paneling just beneath the mantel's edge. He forced the blade in. The trim popped off, revealing a shallow, dark recess in the stone. Inside was a metal box, rusted and small. They carried the box back to the kitchen table. The main light bulb flickered, casting nervous shadows. After several minutes of desperate prying, the rusted metal finally gave way with a groan. Inside, there was no emotional final goodbye from Rose. Instead, there was a stack of official, legal documents and a single, folded sheet of paper. Visual. Extreme close-up on the final paper. Michael's handwriting, precise, cold, and calculated, is clear. Eliza read the title aloud, her voice barely a whisper. Final confession. To be read only upon my death. It was Michael's voice, not Thomas's mother's, that was finally speaking to them. A voice that had been silenced for 7 years, but was now delivered in the coldest, most clinical language possible. Rose found out I was running for mayor while still legally married. She intended to expose me to the town council. She was never going to abandon Thomas, which was the central threat to my career. I convinced her to meet me one last time at the secluded river cottage. The meeting was planned as a final payout to secure her silence and send her away. But it escalated. I had no choice but to ensure she couldn't ruin the future I had spent 20 years building. The paper detailed the crime, a struggle, a forceful blow that Michael described as necessary force, and the frantic decision to dispose of the body in an abandoned, disused well on the old Bennett property, a piece of land Michael had quietly purchased months before the disappearance. The most chilling realization was Michael's meticulous planning. He bought the cottage, then sold the farmhouse to the Harringtons to distance himself from the murder scene. He then took Thomas, the son, under his wing, adopting him to quash any rising suspicions about Rose's true connection to the political family. Eliza stared at the confession. The man she had divorced for emotional infidelity had been a killer and a master manipulator. Her entire decade with him had been a lie, a cover story for a decades-old crime. She looked at Thomas, the man who had been raised in the very house where his mother had made her last, desperate plea for his future. He wanted the truth to die with her. He wanted me to believe she didn't love me enough to stay. The truth was brutal, but it was finally here. The message Rose had left was not a note, but the final, undeniable confession of the man who had taken her life. The tow truck arrived, its lights sweeping across the rain-soaked lawn, its engine a loud, jarring sound in the sudden stillness. Thomas and Eliza stood side by side, holding the sheet of paper that had ruined one life and saved another. The storm had passed. The sky had cleared to a cold, pale dawn. He wanted to ruin us both, Thomas. He wanted us to carry his secret into the ground. But we won't. Thomas nodded slowly, gently lifting the worn journal his mother had kept. He knew the truth would not bring his mother back, but it released him from the lie that she had abandoned him. She didn't run away from me. She ran to the truth. This is the message she left, Eliza. Eliza picked up the phone. Her hands were steady now. She didn't call the police. She called the cold case authorities, the ones who had investigated Rose's original disappearance. She was no longer a victim. She was a witness. The silence that settled over the house was different now. Not the silence of secrets, but the quiet of justice beginning. Eliza had sought silence, but she found a roar. She sought a safe home, but she found a tomb. And in the end, she realized that true peace only begins when the most devastating confessions are finally given a voice. Some strangers enter our lives to disrupt the comfortable routine, and some enter our lives to deliver the painful confessions that set us free. This was a heartfelt confession, a story of a house, a hidden crime, and the two damaged people who finally broke the silence. Don't miss next episode revelation.